New gardener Thunderdome. A whole bunch of plants enter, none of them leaves. So the summer growing season is coming to a close, which means it's time to reflect. I forgot what I was gonna say. Oops. So the summer growing season is coming to a close, which means it's time to reflect on our successes and our failures, of which we have a whole lot of failures. Peanuts? Dead. Potatoes? Dead. Peppery beans? Dead. Squash? Dead. Anything we grew at all? Pretty much dead. So as you can see, a lot of failure to go around. And of course, before we move into finishing up our planning for our already late fall garden, I want to take the time to really collect my thoughts and isolate our successes and failures over the past year and then post it on the internet for everyone to see. Because failing's no fun if no one else gets to see it, right? Right? Now we can break up our summer season, at least for this year, into two phases. The first phase is the south yard, where we were growing mostly in the ground in basins and the plant prison. And the second phase is when we were mostly growing in the front yard after we had reflected on our failures in the south yard. So let's start with phase one. So when you look at the germination rate of the basins versus the plant prison, I think it definitely highlights that we absolutely have to protect all seedlings from wildlife, which is exactly why the plant prison has the netting above it to try and keep all of the wildlife out. Because the one thing that actually did grow in the basins got eaten by a rabbit. Because of course it did. When it came to the plant prison, we found that there were a few takeaways for us. The first lesson is that some plants need more sun. The sunflowers were very, very dwarfed and small in comparison to what they should have been, and likely it's because they needed more sun. Even though we talk about protecting our plants from the western sun down here in the desert, I think this shows that sometimes you need more sun than what you expected, even if it's coming from the west. The second lesson is that no amount of tool will protect against a chinch bug swarm. Pure and simple. And most seedlings are not going to survive a chinch bug swarm, and there was absolutely nothing we could do about that. And the most important lesson that we gained from the plant prison was that protecting our plants from wildlife is all good and well, but it doesn't change the fact that our soil is crap. The hard, compacted clay and the lack of nutrients available for plants to pick up really is going to be an ongoing challenge for us moving forward, we think. Of course, those of you who have been with us the whole time know that that is what sparked us to move into phase two. So to try and combat the awful soil, we decided to try and garden in the front instead. But this time we're going to work on doing more container gardening instead of gardening straight into the soil. Of course, this does mean we were using a mixture of native and gardening soil in certain situations. But even with the soil being improved, we still had problems. We had peanuts over in one container, and we're going to assume that the summer heat got to them and eventually they just yellowed up, shriveled up, and died. We got one flower though, and it was nice while it lasted. With the potatoes, we tried to do the Ruth Stout method, and we found that they were very successful at first, but then just up and died. And then lastly, we had the beautiful container behind me, which is now being protected with tulle because we have a bunch of birds trying to eat all of our toy onions. And we had very low germination in this planter, and I'm not entirely sure why. If it's that birds got to the seeds or that the seeds didn't germinate, I'm still unclear. But even the plants in this planter also succumbed to various maladies over the summer. Our biggest takeaways from the front yard are lesson one: no Ruth Stout method for us, at least not in the way that we did it this year. We found that the alfalfa was really good for keeping the soil moist, but it seemed like it would actively compost in the planter with the plants, and we're fairly certain that the alfalfa ended up cooking the plants, basically. So moving forward, I don't think we're going to be using Ruth Stout in this capacity, but I definitely like the idea of using alfalfa to improve soil, since it looks like it actively composts just by adding water. Lesson 2 from the front yard is the same as lesson 1 from the backyard. Some plants still need more sun. Even though we thought the shade would be helpful, and for a lot of plants it is helpful to be in the shade, but for certain plants, we still found that they were definitely looking more for the sun. Particularly the squash and the watermelon in the planter behind me were constantly reaching out further to get to more sun. So next year we need to really be more careful in where we put truly full sun plants in the yard. And the third lesson is that climate change really sucks. Our monsoon season was completely abnormal from usual. We normally get a wave of humidity coming around the middle to the end of June, and that humidity often helps protect plants from the super duper hot sun and all of the heat that we get. But this year we didn't get that humidity. It stayed very, very dry for Arizona in the summer. And I personally think that caused a lot of damage to some of these plants. There was a super strong western wind that was very, very dry, and it had no qualms drying out every single plant that it touched. If this is how our weather patterns are going to be moving forward, which they are, they're going to be more abnormal. There is no changing that. We really have to start considering the possibility of how will we grow in the summer without the humidity to protect our plants, and how do we combat against such a strong western wind that really, really just dries everything out. So now that we've isolated some lessons that oh my God, Dorian. Dorian! Yeah. What? 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 Huh? I see you. What do you want? You want out. Of course you want out. You don't get to come out. You're not wearing your harness. So now that we've isolated the lessons that we've learned, the question begs, how is this going to influence how we move forward in the fall? Well, for starters, we're going to be pushing our fall garden more into the sun. Last year, we definitely realized that you absolutely have to have the full sun in the winter or things just don't grow very well, and you're also at a higher risk for frost. We're going to make sure to do more container-style gardening where we have better control over the soil quality, which means unfortunately we're going to have to buy more soil, something I would prefer not to do, but here we are. If you want food, I guess this is just what you have to do when you live in the desert. And then we will also be making sure to protect from wildlife as well, continuing to use Tool and making sure to heavily think out how we're going to protect from wildlife, since that is still an ongoing issue. And finally, the biggest thing that we're going to keep doing in the winter is we're just going to keep trying. I definitely struggled this year with wanting to keep going after everything died, and I'm just like,
why am I wasting my time? I suck at this.
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sorta good at something.
I really can't emphasize enough to just keep trying. The only way you're ever going to get better is to fail at it a lot. So here we are. Hopefully this next season will be much better. I should have our fall garden plan video out in a couple weeks so you can see what we're doing, and wish us luck. See you next time.